In 1929, in a dusty palace library in Istanbul, someone found a map. It was drawn in 1513 on the skin of a gazelle, and it showed a coastline that no human being would officially discover for another 300 years. This is the Piri Reis map. For 5 centuries it sat folded in a forgotten archive, and when scholars finally examined it, they found something that should not have been possible. A 16th century admiral, working with the knowledge of his time, had charted lands that were still unknown, with an accuracy mapmakers would not match for generations. By the end of this, you will understand what the map actually shows, where its impossible knowledge came from, and the lost library of maps hiding behind it. Stay with me. The truth is stranger than the myth. The story begins by accident. The Ottoman Sultan's palace, Topkapi, was being turned into a museum. As workers catalogued centuries of clutter, a theologian named Halil Edhem unrolled a fragment of painted gazelle hide. It was a piece of a much larger world map, most of it lost forever. But the surviving third was extraordinary. Covered in coastlines, islands, and dense handwritten notes in Old Ottoman Turkish. The man who drew it signed his name, Piri Reis. Reis means captain. He was an Ottoman admiral, a veteran of naval wars across the Mediterranean and one of the finest cartographers of his age. And in the margins of his map, he did something most mapmakers never did. He told us exactly how he made it. Remember his name because his story does not end well. Decades after drawing this map, an old man now commanding an Ottoman war fleet, Piri Reis failed to take a besieged city and ordered a retreat. The Sultan called it cowardice. And so the greatest cartographer of the empire was beheaded in his 80s. The man who preserved the maps of lost worlds died, with most of his own life's work scattered to the wind. Piri Reis wrote that this map was not his own discovery. He had assembled it like a mosaic from around 20 older source maps. Some were Portuguese charts of the New World. Some were Arab and Indian maps. And some, he claimed, reached back to the age of Alexander the Great. Ancient maps, copied and recopied for nearly 2,000 years, but one source stood out from all the rest. Among his sources, Piri Reis named a map drawn by Christopher Columbus himself, a chart of the lands he had found across the Atlantic. Here is the problem. That map has never been found. It is one of the great lost documents of history, and if Piri Reis is telling the truth, his map may preserve a copy of what Columbus actually saw, surviving nowhere else on Earth. And the map is good, unnervingly good. The relative positions of South America and Africa, the distance between them, are far more accurate than they had any right to be in 1513, an age with no reliable way to measure longitude at sea. Coastlines match. Islands sit where they should. For a document stitched together from scraps, it shows a precision that has puzzled cartographers for a century. To feel why that is strange, you have to understand the problem of longitude. Knowing how far north you are is simple. You measure the sun. But knowing how far east or west you are, alone on open water, requires knowing the exact time in 2 distant places at once. The clock's precise enough to do that would not be invented for another 200 years. Sailors of this age guessed, miscounted, and sailed for coastlines that were not there. And yet the east-west spacing on this map, drawn in that fog of uncertainty, is close to correct. But it is the bottom of the map that made it famous. Below South America, the coastline bends east and keeps going into a large southern landmass. And in the 1950s, a professor named Charles Hapgood made a claim that set the world on fire. That southern coast, he said, was Antarctica. Not the Antarctica we know, buried under 2 miles of ice. The coastline of Antarctica as it looked before the ice. The bare rock beneath. Sit with how impossible that is. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, 3 centuries after this map was drawn, and its coastline has been buried under ice for thousands, perhaps millions of years. To map it without ice, someone would have had to survey that frozen continent in a warmer, forgotten age, and pass the knowledge down through copy after copy, until it reached an Ottoman admiral's desk. Hapgood had an answer, and it was breathtaking. Long before recorded history, he argued, a lost civilization, a culture of ancient sea kings, had mapped the entire globe, advanced enough to measure longitude to reach Antarctica to chart the world. And their maps survived only as fragments, copied by later hands who no longer understood what they were drawing. The Piri Rise map, he said, was one of those fragments. It is a thrilling idea. Lost mapmakers of the Ice Age, their knowledge echoing down through the millennia into a single sheet of gazelle skin. But before we crown the ancient sea kings, we have to ask the harder question. What does the evidence actually say? And here, the myth begins to crack. Most cartographers and historians do not believe the southern coast is Antarctica. In the 16th century, mapmakers routinely drew an imaginary southern continent and often bent the coast of newly found land sideways to fit the edge of the parchment. The simplest explanation is this: that bottom coastline is the coast of South America itself, distorted and stretched to fit the page. The famous accuracy looks softer under scrutiny, too. The coastlines that supposedly match Antarctica only match if you ignore the parts that do not. And the longitude that seems so precise may owe as much to luck and to later interpretation as to any lost ancient science. Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence, and an ice-free Antarctica, mapped in the Stone Age, simply does not have it. So the legend deflates. But here is what the skeptics rarely say out loud. Stripping away the myth does not make this map ordinary. It makes the real mystery sharper. Because Piri Rise still told us in his own hand that he copied from ancient maps and from a lost chart of Columbus. That part is not a theory. It is written on the map, and those source maps are gone. The ancient charts he mentioned, the Columbus map, the libraries that once held them, all vanished. We are staring at a faithful copy of documents we will never see. It is as if someone handed you a single photograph of a burned library and told you it was drawn from 1,000 books that no longer exist. And the Piri Rise map is not alone. Other old charts, the Orontius Phineus, the Haji Ahmed, show the same strange habit. A detailed southern land where there should be only guesswork. Maybe it is all coincidence and copying. Or maybe these maps are faint echoes of a body of knowledge older than we assume, scattered and lost before history began to write itself down. That is the question the map leaves behind. Not whether sea kings or aliens drew it, but how much the ancient world actually knew and then forgot. How many maps, how many discoveries, burned with the Library of Alexandria and 100 archives like it. The Piri Rise map is a door left ajar into everything we have lost. We like to picture history as a line that only moves forward, knowledge forever piling higher. But this map hints at something darker, that knowledge can be won and then lost, charted and then forgotten. That thing can be known by one generation and become impossible to the next. We still have the map. You can see it today sealed in a vault in Istanbul, a fragment of a picture we will never complete. What was drawn on the rest of it? That is a question for another file. Subscribe so it finds you. This is Black Salt Ledger.